Hey everyone, I'm Katie Barton. Welcome back to another episode of Create Your Character. To kick off Season 4 of Attack on Titan, I decided to show you how I made my Scout Regiment jacket. I don't think it would hold up very well in a fight against human-eating giants, but it still looks cool enough to maybe impress some of your fellow Attack on Titan fans. So if you're looking to make your own jacket but don't know where to start, stick around!
To start off, I'm using the McCall's M7733 pattern by Yaya Han. It's just a basic jacket pattern that I thought would be perfect to make a Attack on Titan jacket. So I'm just laying out the pieces and cutting them out onto the fabric. Before I sew any of the pieces together, I'm going to make sure that I press them and get any creases out so it looks nice and finished whenever I'm done with the jacket. It's usually a good idea to iron out anything that you plan on sewing because it really adds for that finished look of whatever thing that you're sewing. So I'm going to start by clipping the front and the side front together. These are going to be the pieces that I sew together first. I'm using sewing clips. I like using these better than needles because I find myself stabbing myself whenever I use needles, so this kind of avoids a little bit of that downside. So after I have them clipped together, I'm just going to go ahead and run them through my sewing machine. I'm using a 5/8 seam allowance, and I am just using a straight stitch. I'm not doing a zigzag or anything fancy. Just making sure that as I go around the curve, I'm keeping it as in line with the seam allowance as possible. The next part that I'm going to sew is the back and the side back. I clipped those together and then simply ran them through my sewing machine, just like the front and the side front. Here I am doing the other side of the jacket. Now I'm going to sew the shoulder part on each side of the jacket. For the little decorative thingies on the shoulder, I'm going to use a newspaper. I'm going to draw my pattern out of newspaper and then cut it out, make sure I like the length and the size. Then I'm going to cut those pieces out of the fabric. I have to cut these little notches so I can fold over the fabric so it won't fray. This is how I'm going to hem it, by cutting those little notches. Then I'm just going to top stitch it through the sewing machine. This was a little tricky, but I just stayed really close to the edge and it turned out fine. Just to make sure that those edges that I flipped over don't flip back. I'm going to do the same thing to the other one. Now I'm going to quickly sew those into place onto the top of the sleeve. And I'm going to sew the sleeves shut. But I'm not going to sew all the way down the sleeve because there is this part at the end of the sleeve that you flip over. So I'm just going to go right into the end until where you can see it kind of has this bell shape going out. Then I'm going to clip the bottom of the sleeve so I can hem it. Then I'm just going to run that through my sewing machine so it's nice and hemmed. So now I'm going to flip the sleeve inside out, and I'm going to sew this end of the sleeve that is going to be flipped. So I flip it and then I just stitch along the sides, and then it gets flipped inside out like that. And it makes the little cuffs that they have in the show. Here I am sewing the collar. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to be attaching the sleeves to the jacket. To do this, I flip the jacket part inside out and then just stick the sleeve through the hole and then clip it to where it lines up, where the seam on the bottom of the sleeve lines up with that seam on the armpit of the jacket. Then I'm just going to follow my 5/8 seam allowance along the armhole of the sleeve. Sleeves used to scare me when I started out sewing, but now that I've kind of unlocked the secret, which there really is no secret, you just don't let the sleeves scare you, they're really not that bad. Just keep the curves lined up with the seam allowance and it's easy peasy. Before I attach the collar, I want to flip it inside out and make sure it's nice and pressed, because the collar does look kind of sharp. And then for the bottom of the jacket, there is this, I don't know what you would call it. There's like this 2 to 3 inch little thing running along the bottom of the jacket. So I measured the bottom of my jacket. It ended up being about 38 inches long, and I wanted it to be 3 inches wide, so I cut my piece of fabric to be 6 inches wide, so when I folded it over, I would get the width that I wanted. So here I am folding that bottom piece in half and clipping it to the bottom of my jacket. I don't know why, even though I measured it, I still ended up having some excess on the end. But it wasn't too much of a worry, I just cut it off at the end. This was easy peasy, it was just a straight line along the bottom. Now I'm gonna clip the collar in place. And just sew it along the neckline. Again, this was also easy peasy. It's pretty much a straight line. Had a small curve to it, but nothing too fancy. Here is the pattern I made for the pockets. Again, I had to cut little notches around the side so I would be able to flip it, so I could get that nice clean edge while I top stitched. And then I put my jacket on a dress form so I could get that pocket placement just right. And I just pinned it in place where I thought the pockets would line up nicely. And then I top stitched them onto the jacket. This was a little tricky because I had to stay really close to the edge, but it was mostly straight lines, so it really wasn't that difficult. And And to finish it off, I just put on little silver buttons onto the pockets and to the things on the shoulders. The patches are just iron-on patches that somebody gifted me, but you can just get them off of Etsy. You can just search for Attack on Titan iron-on patches and get whatever regiment you like.
Thanks for watching! I hope this was helpful. This is one of my favorite things I've sewn in all my years of cosplaying. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to tweet me at ZTV Goofing Off with the hashtag CreateYourCharacter. Until next time!